reduction officer at Sussex Police Road Safety Team.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Ed and Heidi, for the invite, and I've been asked to speak to you today about tyre safety, which is obviously just one of the many things that we do here to engage, educate, and when necessary enforce with our motorcycle community. So if we just start the slides off, please Ed. So what we're going to cover today is why we need to look at tyres and why they're so important in many aspects. We won't just look at collisions, but we'll also broaden that and add a bit more context. We'll look at some tyre wear and profiles and how you can check your tyres, not just by looking at them, but the feel as well, and knowing the feeling of a bad tyre or something else that's gone wrong or maybe going wrong with the bike, as well as how we can check tyres. And it sounded like someone was very confident, but tyres, when we compare them to motorbike tyres, when we compare them to car tyres, are very different patterns, types, depending on the brand. So there's some really useful tips that I'll give you for that, and what we look at when we have to enforce. So we'll look at some legislation and what that could potentially mean for a license, insurance prices, etc. So the importance of tyres, the crash reality, so increases the risk of collision. Goes without saying, stopping distances increase in wet conditions and unpredictable handling. These all sound like quite a relatively straightforward, obvious problem you're going to have with tyres without much tread, but actually the reason for having tread in the first place is for water dissipation in wet. So as soon as it rains, you lose what the tyres are meant to be there for. There's no escaping of the water, which means it just adds another layer between the tyre and the road, and that is the only thing that's connecting you to it. So yeah, there's lots of other factors, not just it's a bit slippery. It's going to almost increase your braking distance by about 40% in the wet. It's also going to give you unpredictable handling when you're leaning around corners. You're suddenly moving from a very much a good part of the tyre to a very bald spot that doesn't have any water, any way for the water to dispel out of the tyre. So it's going to make it a really nervous ride. And if we look at the human cost in the amount of time you would need to spend in hospital because you've had that crash that's potentially avoidable, you've got the risk of mobility issues, and especially as a young rider, you may be looking at getting to a bigger bike eventually, and it's all putting that in jeopardy just by in the beginning, just not being as aware of what the costs are. And then an addition to that, you've also got things like insurance companies, and as most of you know, insurance is extremely expensive. And if you ever have a crash and it's investigated, they may look at your bike, especially more serious injury crashes. In my experience, from attending a lot of these, is the bike is inspected like the helmet would be, but the tyres would be inspected if they're found to be under the legal limit. You may have some real issues with actually claiming from the insurance company. So, when you think about compensation for your broken leg or something like that, well, if you've got things in there that are not wrong with the bike, then that can cause some real unnecessary delays, questions, and similar to other parts of the bike, especially things like your visor. So you might buy a bike helmet with a real tinted visor, but actually if it's not shatterproof, if it is too heavily tinted, it says not for road use on it, and you have a collision of some sort, it could be brought into doubt that actually it was caused by you not being able to see properly, you not being able to stop in a reasonable distance. So yeah, it's just thinking about that wider context of actually, if I'm riding a moped, what's 40 to 50 pounds on a new tyre? If actually down the line somebody crashes into me, I haven't got all of these questions and doubts. So that is obviously one extreme, but it is just adding that little bit of context that I just find helps with all the motorcyclists that we speak to over here. Next slide, please, Ed. So I said about what we're going to look for. So we're looking for splits and cracks and the cord showing through the tyre, which is a metal band, which is essentially your final layer before something pops. Screws and nails, and that photo is from this afternoon when I was in Brighton. Stopped a biker, and that was there shining in the sun. Nice silver little dot on his tyre that he hadn't realised. That can have really real bad impacts, as I don't need to go into those in any more detail, but it just shows how common you may come across those. And actually a weekly check, I'm sure everyone does their powder checks, but actually that there are things that you need to do every time you ride your bike. And if you don't already, then when you move on to bigger bikes, even now that a lot of the bikes that I ride here, as an advanced police motorcyclist, it has digital gauges of what the tyre pressures are and things like that. But it's all about not just seeing, I can see that it's the right pressures, but actually, as we all know, as bike riders, just by putting a bit more pressure in, making sure that it's absolutely exactly as it needs to be, it just makes the ride a whole far smoother and one less thing on your mind. So, we're not just checking with tyres, we're checking for damage all over. But especially we're checking lights in the dark and tyres every time we ride. And then the tread, and I'll go on to tread in the next slide, and how you can measure that. So also, it's not just what we look for, it's what we feel for. And actually handling is something that I know if I'm on a cold tyre or a warm tyre. If I'm riding fairly fast and it's December, I appreciate that I'm going to need to warm up my tyres a little bit and expect not to be able to use the full use of the tyre possibly straight away. But actually, like I was saying earlier, you may feel a bit of a skittish. You may not just feel very comfortable and not be able to explain it. That could be down to your tyres not warming up properly. It could be down to them being the wrong pressures. It could be a slow puncher or something like that. So again, tyre gauges, pressure gauges are always going to be useful. But you're also going to feel suspension. So if you're going over potholes and things like that, which are probably very common wherever you're watching this from, you may find that some feel like a bit more of a bang than what they usually may. So, and obviously potholes themselves can cause lots of rim damage, which is then obviously going to allow air to escape from the tyre and give you a flat tyre. And also, like I said earlier about braking, you may feel some, not so much chatter, but you may feel some vibration when you're braking. That could be down to a number of things, but especially if it's in the wet and you don't feel that they're being as efficient as they were, that again, it all comes down to the tyres as well. And again, that just opens up a bit more about tyres aren't just, a bit of rubber at the end. They actually do a lot, and they actually add a lot to your comfortable ride and your confidence in riding. So yeah, a lot of it will stem from tyres. Next slide, please, Ed. So how to measure your tread depth, and this is something even in the police force that I train a lot and refresh lots of colleagues on. And if you have a motorcycle, you'll be used to your tread depth and how you measure that. But actually, when you're moving from bike to bike, if you're a younger rider, you might be changing bikes quite often as you may try and be building up to a faster bike as soon as you can. So you may come across lots of different brands, which will mean that you'll be moving into lots of different types of tread patterns and tread depths. On all tyres that are made, there's a tyre wear indicator on the side. That's going to be indicated by either an arrow, it may say TWI, but there'll be regular points. I think it's about 10 points around each tyre when you look on the sidewall, indicating where the tread wear indicator is. So you follow that arrow across, and you'll find the little rubber wear indicators, and that's where you can use your depth indicator next to them to measure how much depth you have, and that needs to be all around the tyre and in the main part of the tyre essentially. You need to have 1 mil for any bike that's over 50 cc, unlike a car it's 1.6 millimeters, and if it's under 50 cc, we're talking a moped, it needs to have a visible band all the way around. Next slide, please. So finally, when we move on to enforcement, when it's absolutely necessary, this can have some real significant repercussions later on, especially if you're, or whether you're looking to sort of just be on the road from being 16 years old, or moving to bigger bikes, or even getting your car. This will stay with your driving license for a few years. So the significance is, for the first 2 years of driving or riding, you have 6 points on your license. That potentially allows you to get up to 6 points, and before you lose your license. After 2 years, you'll have 12 points. But say if you were stopped and both of your tyres were under the legal limit, that's 6 points, and potentially that's disqualification, which not only means having your bike potentially taken away, but it just means that you'll be disqualified for a period of time. When you get it back, it will always remain, or for a long time, remain on any license you then go on to, or test you then go on to take, and have serious insurance repercussions. So it's obviously not advisable. And as we said earlier, the enforcement part is essentially sort of the last part. If by these sort of webinars, that whole lesson of actually there's more context to this, for a 40 to 50 pound tyre, just on that alone. But actually, when we look at the enforcement, there is those license repercussions. There's a cost of the fines in addition to the points that you have, but also with vehicle seizures as well. So road policing officers will have an additional power a lot of the time, where we'll be able to prohibit vehicles from being on the road because of their condition. So if they do have ball tyres and things like that, then we can take them off the road until they're MOT'd, which leaves you with, almost a couple of £100 just in recovery fees. So when we think about what the repercussions are of not doing this, I think you'll probably agree, it's absolutely worth just investing a little bit of time and a little bit of thought when you're riding on a daily basis to just check your tyres for your own safety and for any horrible repercussions down the road. Thanks very much.
Excellent.